Hey guys, Mr. Milson here. Today we're going to talk about standard form. At the end of this video, you should be able to transform linear equations to standard form and from standard form to slope-intercept form. You should also be able to use the x-intercept and y-intercept to graph a line in standard form. Okay, standard form of a linear equation is this. ax plus by equals c. Okay, notice that x and y are on the same side. Okay, where were they in slope-intercept form? On different sides. Okay, y was by itself and x was sided. Okay, y was by itself and then x was by the slope. Notice that you can't look at this equation and find the slope. Or y-intercept. Okay, so in this equation, A and B and C don't necessarily stand for any particular thing. Okay, these are just coefficients that go in front of x and y. Okay, so they don't stand for anything in particular. So in order to find the slope, what we will do is that we will get y by itself. Okay, when we get y by itself, that will allow us to see the slope on the other side, because really what we've done is put it in the slope-intercept form. So if we're trying to find the slope here for the first problem, we're going to solve for y, like our literal equations. Okay, so the first thing we do here was we'll subtract 6x from both sides, and that will leave us with 4y equals negative 6x plus 20. Okay, and then we'll divide by 4. Okay, because that will get y all the way by itself, and that means we're dividing everything on this side by 4. So y will equal negative 6 over 4, or, as I simplify it, it'll be negative 3 over 2, x plus 5. Now, I'm writing plus 5 because that's putting it all in slope-intercept form, but if they're asking you for slope, the important part is the slope, okay, the number in front of x. So the slope for this problem is negative 3/2. Okay. Number 2. Again, we're trying to get y by itself, so I'm going to subtract x from both sides, and that will give me 3y equals negative x plus 12. I'll divide both sides by 3 to get y all the way by itself so I can find the slope. And so y will equal negative 1/3 x plus 4. Okay, you might say, hey, where'd the 1 come from? Remember that when we have a number in front of x, if it's not showing, then it's a 1. Okay, and so our slope is negative 1/3. Alright, find the slope for number 3. Make sure you bring that to class completed. So, if standard form is not good for finding slope, what is it good for? Okay, notice that in order to find the slope, we had to take it out of standard form and put it in slope-intercept form. Well, this equation is good for finding the x and y intercepts. The x-intercept and y-intercept. Okay, we've talked about / used the y-intercept, so with that info, what is an x-intercept? Okay, a y-intercept always has the coordinates 0 something, some number. Okay, but an x-intercept has the coordinates some number and 0. So where our y-intercept is always on the y-axis, our x-intercept is always on the x-axis. Okay, so let's find the x and y intercepts here. Now, this is where it's really nice. Now, visually, we could find the y-intercept in slope-intercept form, but it's just as easy, really, to find it in standard form. Because what we do is, since we know that the y-intercept happens when x is 0, what we'll do to find the y-intercept is plug 0 in for x. Okay, if we plug 0 in for x, guess what happens to this number? 4 times 0 is 0. Essentially, it disappears. And then we have an equation without x. We just have 9y equals 36. And so we have that 9y equals 36. Remember, we did that. We got to that point by plugging in 0 for x. And then we solve for y. And so y would equal 4. Our y-intercept would be at 4, or our coordinate would be 0, 4. To find the x-intercept, we do the same thing, except instead of plugging in 0 for x, we're going to plug 0 in for y. So again, 9 times 0 is 0. That goes away. We'd have 4x equals 36. Or, let's solve for this, x equals 9. So our x-intercept is going to be at 9, or 9, 0. Now, this happened this time, and it could happen a couple other times, but I just want to make sure I give you early warning that the x and y intercept aren't like opposites or anything like that. It's not that if you have 9 as your coefficient in one problem and you find 4, then the other one has to be 4, and it was 9. You just have to find these separately, okay? Okay, so here's how we'll do this. Again, you can use the plug-in 0 method, or I like to call it the cover-up method because it's essentially the same thing. When I plug in 0 for y, I'm going to have 5x minus 0. So essentially I'm just taking that out of the problem. Now I can rewrite this problem without the y there. So I'd have 5x equals negative 60. Solving this will give me the x-intercept. I divide by 5 on both sides, I get x equals negative 12. So my x-intercept is at negative 12, or negative 12, 0. Okay, I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to plug in 0 for 5x, or really that's getting rid of it. But notice, guys, that I did not cover up the sign in front of y. Okay, it's really important that I keep it negative if it's negative. In this case it is. So I have negative 4y equals negative 60. I'll divide both sides by negative 4, and that gives me y equals 15. So y-intercept is 15, 0, 15. Okay. Try that here with number 3. Find the x and the y-intercept. Alright. Topic 3, graphing using intercepts. Alright, so here's what we'll do. If we're graphing using standard form, then we'll use the intercepts. And what we'll do is we'll find the x and y-intercept. We'll plot both points on the graph. And then draw your line. So here, I'm given 6x plus 2y equals 12. This is in standard form. And so I can find my x-intercept. 6x equals 12. And so then I find that x is 2. So that means my point is 2, 0. I can do the same thing with y. 2y equals 12. And so I get y is 6. So 0, 6. And so now with those points, I just have my point at 2, 0. My point at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I have those 2 points. That is all I need in order to make a line. So I'm going to make a line through those 2 points. And there we have it. Okay. Try that with number 2. Okay, if you need to rewatch that first problem to see how it was done, rewatch it. Try it with number 2. I want to make sure that you are able to do that same thing. Now, we're going to talk about putting a line into standard form. Okay, so here's the rule with standard form. A, B, and C cannot be fractions. So when putting an equation into standard form, you must have whole numbers, or integers. Okay, remember that standard form basically just means that we want x and y on the same side, and we don't want fractions in front of them, or fractions in the problem. So for this first problem, I just want to get x and y on the same side. I'm going to move x to the other side. And I do that by using inverse operations just the same as we had before. I'm going to add 4x to both sides, and I have 4x to positive y equals 7. Okay. Second problem, I want to, again, move the x to the other side. I'm going to subtract 2/3 x from both sides. And so what I have then is negative 2/3 x plus y equals 4. Now notice here I have a fraction. I'm going to want to get rid of this fraction. And the way that I'll do that is I am going to look at the denominator. I'm going to multiply both sides by that denominator. Okay. Now what that'll do is I distribute it to both of these terms, is with this term, it'll just cancel out the denominator. So I have negative 2x. On the other side, 3 times y will give me 3y. Not the other side, but the other term. And then on the other side, I have 4 times 3, which is 12. And so you see that by multiplying by that denominator and distributing it out, I've gotten rid of the fraction without having to do a whole lot to it, okay? So just noticing that denominator and choosing wisely that value. Okay. Number 3, we have y equals negative 1/5 x minus 9. Okay. So, how many have I given you? This will be the third one. I'll do it. Do it with you. You can pause the video, try it on your own, come back and see how if you went through the same steps. Okay. So here you're adding 1/5 x to both sides. Okay, and so that'll cancel out on this side. We'll have 1/5 x plus y equals negative 9. Again, we have a fraction, so we need to get rid of that. I'm going to multiply both sides by 5 in order to get rid of it. And so as I distribute it to this left, just cancel out. So I have just x plus 5y equals negative 45. And there we have it, writing it from slope-intercept form into standard form and making sure that we use integers and not fractions. Okay, so last question here, and this is going to have us bouncing back and forth between slope-intercept form and standard form. So, first question asks us to find the slope. Which form is good for finding the slope? Well, that's slope-intercept form. Okay, that's y equals intercept, or y equals mx plus b. Which slope is good for, or which form is good for finding the x-intercept? Well, that is standard form. Okay, and which slope is good for finding the y-intercept? I'll say both. Both of them are pretty good for finding the y-intercept. Maybe slope-intercept form just a little bit more, just because it's by itself already, but it's easy enough to find in either form. So, let's answer these questions. Since this is already in standard form, I'm going to use standard form to find my x-intercept. So I have 2x equals 28. And then I solve that. That'll give me x equals 14. My x-intercept is at 14, or I can say 14 comma 0. Okay. I can do the same thing with my y-intercept. Cover up the x. Negative 4y equals 28. Divide by negative 4. And y will give me negative 7. So then at negative 7, or 0, negative 7. Okay, and then finally for slope, I will need to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, and that will leave me negative 4y equals negative 2x plus 28. Okay, and then I need to get y all the way by itself, so I'm going to divide both things by negative 4. So y equals 2/4 x minus 7. Now 2/4, I don't want to write that as my final slope. 2/4 I'm going to simplify and make 1/2. So my final slope is 1/2. Alright, so we looked at standard form, we looked at how to graph it, we've looked at finding the x and y intercept, changing from standard form to slope intercept form, and changing from slope intercept form to standard form. Okay, so a lot to digest there. Make sure you complete those couple practice problems that I had you complete, and bring them to class, complete it with your notes. See ya.